Everything we want to accomplish in our lives takes so much effort. Wouldn't it be great if we could just make tiny adjustments to our daily routine and achieve remarkable results? James Clear claims that this is possible, and he explains how it works in his book Atomic Habits. And today we'll take a look at that. Welcome to the Soft Skill channel. My name is Sebastian Jung and today I've got another book review for you. We will discuss Atomic Habits by James Clear. James Clear is a writer and speaker and he runs habitsacademy.com where you can book courses about habits. So as you'll notice, all of this is based on the success of this book, Atomic Habits. What James Clear did before that, there is very little information about that on the internet, but the book will shed some light on that in a moment. Atomic Habits was published in 2018. I previously presented another book about habits, which is The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. This one was published in 2012, so it is older, and The Power of Habit is referred to and used as a source in Atomic Habits. At the beginning of the book, we get to know about James Clear's story. Because he suffered a severe injury on his very last day of high school, got a baseball bat into his face in an accident, and he had to go through a slow and difficult recovery. But he still managed to become widely successful at college. He became a great student, got excellent marks. At the same time, he became widely successful as an athlete. He ended up breaking several school records. And all of that was possible because he discovered the power of small habits. So he started a website and an email newsletter about this topic, and they became quite successful. So, Penguin Random House offered him a book deal. And this ended with this very book, Atomic Habits. In the second part of the book, we learn about the fundamentals, the basic idea James Clear presents here. A lot of small changes over time will accumulate and lead to great results. Think of compound interest. If I had invested a small sum of money lots of years back with a nice interest over time, this would have accumulated to a nice sum. And this is also how habits work. As an example, Clear tells us about the British cycling team. This was in the past a team that was widely unsuccessful. They had never won the Tour de France, for example. But then they hired a new performance director, one Dave Brailsford. And Brailsford had an interesting idea. He said, we will take this concept of cycling apart and we will look at each individual component and make a small improvement. Just 1% is enough. And if we put it all back together, we will have a nice big improvement. So they took each individual component. For example, they redesigned the seats to be more comfortable. They redesigned the clothing to be more aerodynamic. They made lots of small changes to the training routines and so on. And this really accumulated to a big improvement. The British cycling team became widely successful. For example, within 10 years, they won the Tour de France 5 times after they hadn't been able to do it even a single time before. And this, Clear says, will work for us as well if we focus on making small improvements to our daily habits that will accumulate over time. Now, one problem we have to keep in mind is, unfortunately, it works the same way for our bad habits. For example, if I eat an unhealthy meal just once, I won't gain a lot of weight, it won't ruin my health, it won't be a big issue. But if I make it into a habit, if I eat unhealthy meals on a regular basis, this will surely lead to weight increase and health issues. So we have to be very careful. And another important point is, Clear says, we might not see improvements right away. Sometimes we need to cross a certain threshold. As a metaphor, he describes a situation where we are in a room with an ice cube and the temperature is several degrees below freezing. And then the temperature increases 1 degree at a time, and it increases again and again, and we don't see any difference. The ice cube looks just the same. But then at a certain point, the temperature increases above freezing and the ice cube starts to melt. So we finally see an improvement. We finally see a change, but this is only possible due to the several small temperature increases that came before and that had no noticeable effect. Now, some of you might say, if we want to achieve great results, first and foremost, we need goals. Because this is quite a common idea, isn't it? But James Clear contradicts that. He says goals aren't that great, goals are overrated. He explains, first of all, that winners and losers often have the same goals. Every athlete who takes part in the Olympics wants to win the gold medal. Every applicant, every candidate wants the job. So it's not the goals that set apart winners and losers. Furthermore, if we only focus on goals, our changes might only be temporary. For example, if I make it my goal to clean up my messy room and I manage to do so, but I still stick to my bad habits, like not putting things away after using them, things like that, the room will be messy again in no time and my goal won't mean anything after all. And goals make us unhappy, because I might end up thinking, oh no, I haven't reached my goal yet, my life is so sad and pitiful. And finally, if we only focus on goals, we might stop making an effort after reaching our goal. Let's say I've made it my goal to lose a few pounds of weight and I've managed to do it. At this point, I might just stop eating more healthy, exercising regularly and whatnot, because I think it's not necessary anymore, and soon my goal won't mean anything anymore because I've gained weight again. So for long-term progress and results, we should focus on the systems, the processes, on our daily habits, not on goals. And habits are even more important because Clear says identity is established through habits. So we should focus on who we want to become, not on what we want to achieve. Imagine, for example, you see a person who is eating healthy and who is exercising regularly, and you might think, oh, this is a person, they surely care about their body and their health, and you might think, oh, I wish I could be like them. Well, we could be if we just also start eating healthy and exercising regularly. So we can change our beliefs about ourselves if we change our habits. In this first part of the book, Clear also explains how habits work. There is a habit loop, as we already know from Duhigg, and for Clear, it has the following elements: cue, craving, response, and reward. So it might work like that. For example, I am at work and I am bored, and the boredom is the cue. So I experience a craving. I crave distraction. So as a response, I take out my phone and check social media. And the reward I get is distraction is relief from my boredom. As you might recall, Charles Duhigg also described a habit loop, but his version had cue, routine, and reward, so it was phrased slightly differently, and Clear added craving as a specific additional step. In the next parts of the book, Clear will present 4 rules of behavior change, and each of those rules will cover one of the steps of the habit loop. First of all, he discusses cues, and the first law is make it obvious. Because habits are triggered by cues, so if we want to establish a good habit, we need an obvious cue to make sure we will perform the habit regularly. And if we want to get rid of bad habits, we will turn things around, we will inverse the first law, we make it invisible. So for example, if I want to eat healthier, I should place the fruit in a bowl right on the living room table so they are within reach and I see them all the time. But the unhealthy chocolate I should hide deep in the cupboard so it is invisible. If I want to establish an entirely new habit, I need to think about which cue I want to use. And here Clear says the most common cues are time and location. This is slightly different from Duhigg because Duhigg also mentioned emotional state, other people, and immediately preceding action, but we will go with time and location for now. Clear says we should make an implementation intention. We should make a specific plan in the form I will behavior at time in location. So for example, if I want to take a short walk regularly, I could say I will take a short walk in the park right when I get home from work. I can take this a step further by using what Clear calls habit stacking. Here I link a new habit with an existing habit. Let's say I have established this habit of taking the small walk in the park, and now I also want to do some more reading. I could say, after I return from my walk in the park, this is the old habit, I will read a chapter in the book I'm currently reading. This is the new habit that is linked up with the existing habit. The second law deals with craving, and the second law is make it attractive, because habits are driven by dopamine, the chemical released by the reward centers in our brains. And it is the anticipation of the reward, not so much the reward itself, that makes us take action. So what do we do if we want to establish a habit where we don't feel a strong craving, such as eating healthy or exercising? Here Clear says we need to associate those habits with positive emotion, and he presents different strategies for doing that. First of all, we can use what he calls temptation bundling. We combine an action we want to do with an action we need to do. I could say, for example, every Tuesday evening I will go to the gym and exercise, which is what I need to do, and after I return home, I will watch an episode of my favorite series as a reward, which is what I want to do. A similar strategy is the motivation ritual. Here Clear recommends that if we need to do something that is boring or unpleasant, we should start with something short that is pleasant to put us in a good mood. For example, let's say I have to do boring paperwork one evening each week. Before I start doing that, I could listen to my favorite song to get into a positive mood. And finally, a good strategy is to join a group where my desired behavior is approved of or even praised. So for example, if I want to exercise more, I could join a sports club where I am surrounded by people who like to exercise and who also want to get fit. Another helpful strategy is to figure out the underlying motive, because Clear says our modern habits are just modern day solutions to ancient desires and ancient drives. For example, I might experience a craving to smoke a cigarette, but what I actually crave is not so much a cigarette, but to be relieved from stress, and the cigarette is just a means to get that. And it is important to understand that, because then I might employ a different means to achieve this goal, to relieve this craving. Of course, the second law can also be inverted. For bad habits, the rule is make it unattractive. Clear says Alan Carr's book, Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking, is a good example of how to do that, of how to associate a bad habit with negative feelings. Because Clear teaches the readers about how to get a better attitude towards smoking. For example, he says you don't quit smoking, because smoking doesn't give you anything. You don't lose anything if you give it up. Or you don't need smoking to socialize. You can socialize without smoking. You don't need smoking to relieve your nerves. Your nerves will actually suffer from smoking in the long term. So he explains the basics, explains the topic to create a better understanding of all the negative effects this bad habit has, and this helps to associate it with negative feelings. And at the same time, we can highlight the advantages we will have by stopping this bad habit. The third law deals with the response, with the specific action we take, and the third law is make it easy, because we are always looking for the path of least resistance. We always try to spend the least amount of effort. So we want to create an environment where doing the right thing is as easy as possible. We want to reduce friction for good habits, but increase friction for bad habits. So for example, if I want to get fit, I should keep my running shoes right at the door and keep my running clothes ready. So if I have some time, I can go running right away without lots of preparation. And on the other hand, if I want to watch less TV, I could turn the TV off instead of setting it to standby. I could take the batteries out of the remote. I could even put the TV away into another room or in a cupboard if that is feasible. So I have to put some effort in whenever I want to watch TV. Another way to make things easier is to keep the response, the action, very short and simple. Clear says if you want to establish a new habit, at the beginning it should only take 2 minutes. Because even if the habit is so short, finished so quickly, it will still impact our behavior for a long time afterwards. One good habit, one good decision can lead to further good habits and good decisions afterwards. As an example, he describes the morning routine of the famous dancer and choreographer Twyla Tharp. Each morning, Tharp will wake up, get clothed and so on, then hail a taxi, go to the gym and perform an extensive 2-hour workout. But Tharp says, the critical point of this morning ritual is not the 2-hour workout. The critical part is hailing that taxi. Once she's told the driver to take her to the gym, she will also perform the workout. So this is the part she really has to finish in order for this ritual to succeed. And I think this is a good point for us. Another helpful strategy is a so-called commitment device. I make a decision now that will influence my behavior in the future. For example, it is difficult to resist the temptation if some chocolate is right in front of me, but it is way easier to not buy any chocolate in the first place, so I won't be tempted later. Here technology can also be helpful. For example, if I want to save more money, I can save up a regular saving plan where money is regularly transferred to some savings account. The fourth and final law deals with the reward, and the fourth law is make it satisfying. Because if an experience is satisfying, we are more likely to repeat it. But we have to be more specific here, because we clearly prioritize immediate rewards over delayed rewards. So more correctly, we'd have to say an experience that is immediately satisfying will be repeated. And an experience that is immediately punished or painful will not be repeated. So, if we want to establish good habits, we need to find a way to make them immediately rewarding, to get an immediate sense of accomplishment, to have a small win right away. And Clear says a good way to do that is to make the progress visible by tracking our habits. For example, I could put a mark on the calendar each time I exercise as I had planned or whatnot, and then I can stand in front of the calendar and say, oh great, I managed to do it 10 days in a row. I'm doing so well, and I can see my progress and be proud of myself. And here, of course, it is very important to not break the chain, to keep doing it every day. And if we miss out a day for some reason, to get back at it right away and continue the chain right on the next day, to at least not break the chain 2 times in a row. Of course, also the fourth law can be inverted. For bad habits, here the rule is make it unsatisfying. Because if something is unsatisfying or painful, we will not repeat it. Now, let's say I had planned to go to the gym Tuesday evenings, but actually I've made it a habit to just watch TV while laying on the couch and be lazy. Now, being on the couch and watching TV is not painful or unsatisfying, so I will probably stick to that. But I can add costs to that behavior. Clear has 2 strategies for that, and that is an accountability partner and a habit contract. So first of all, I will tell someone about my plan. I could, for example, tell my girlfriend, I will now go to the gym each Tuesday evening. And then I will make a contract with her that could, for example, state I will go to the gym each Tuesday evening, and each time I don't do it, I will donate $50 to whatever organization. So first of all, knowing that someone is watching is a powerful motivator, because I don't want to disappoint my girlfriend. And then I surely don't want to pay $50 each week. So this being lazy on the couch has suddenly become very costly and unpleasant, and I probably won't do it a lot anymore. After the 4 parts of the book where the laws are described, there is a section with advanced tactics where Clear presents some additional concepts that are helpful. For example, he states that we should choose the right field of competition, the right habits, because he says some of our strengths and weaknesses are inborn, are based on our genes, and we can still train to improve, but if we have a natural disadvantage, we will have a hard time. As an example, he describes a world-famous runner and a world-famous swimmer, and he describes how they both have bodies that fit their specific sport very well. And if the runner would suddenly stop running and swim instead, and the other way around, even if they kept training really hard, they probably wouldn't become world famous anymore because they wouldn't rely on their strength anymore. So especially in areas where there is competition, where we have to compete with others, we should try to pick areas, to pick a field where we can use our strength, where we can have an advantage. We will still need to work hard, but we will have way better chances. Another concept Clear presents is the so-called Goldilocks rule. It states that peak motivation occurs if we work on a task that is on the edge of our current ability. So it has to be difficult, it has to be challenging, but we still need to be able to do it. Clear says boredom is quite dangerous. Boredom is a greater threat than failure. And of course, if we perform a habit again and again and again, it won't be that exciting anymore. After a while, it will turn into a routine. And to keep going, we have to be disciplined, have to stick to it, and we need to increase the difficulty to keep it interesting. Finally, there is a short conclusion in the book where Clear gives a brief summary of his method again at the end. Small changes that accumulate over time will lead to great results. And he presents another metaphor that I like, which is the so-called Socrates paradox. There is the question, can one coin make a man rich? And we would probably say, no, that is not enough by far. However, if I give a man a coin and then another and another, and I keep doing that, at some point this man will cross the threshold from not being rich to being rich, and at this time only one coin will have made the difference, will have crossed that threshold. So it's pretty similar to that metaphor with the ice cube earlier, and Clear says that is how the power of small habits works. Finally, there are some appendices. There are questions like, how can I apply these ideas to business? How can I apply them to parenting? And there Clear says we can get additional materials on his websites. And of course, there are acknowledgements, notes, and an index. So finally, let's proceed to the critique. The book is quite easy to read and comprehend. At the end of each chapter, there is a short summary which is quite helpful. And at the end of each part that describes a law, there is a habit cheat sheet that lists the strategies we have learned and that is expanding over time. So the book is really easy to comprehend. As I mentioned before, there are some additional materials and templates that can be downloaded from James Clear's websites. jamesclear.com and atomichabits.com, especially atomichabits.com. Unfortunately, you need to provide an email address before you can access anything, but it's nice, there are additional materials. Now, as for the book and the method itself, personally, I really like the basic idea. This concept of making small changes to daily routines, daily habits, and the effects will accumulate over time, lead to great results. I think this is a great strategy. I like that. Now, the specific strategies themselves are a bit more difficult. Now, they are probably fine overall. There are lots of proven concepts here, like that Goldilocks rule, the importance of smaller wins, implementation intentions. All of those are proven concepts that work. However, in some cases, I'm not so sure. I think I probably still don't know enough about habits to really be able to tell. Because sometimes Clear's strategies are not as closely linked to research as we've seen in Duhick's Power of Habit. Now, don't get me wrong. The sources Clear provides are fine. For each anecdote, each example he gives, there are proper sources. However, this isn't always the case for the strategies. Now, let me give you an example. One strategy I mentioned is to make things more difficult for bad habits. If you want to watch less TV, turn it off instead of on standby, take the batteries out of the remote, put the TV away into another room or into a cupboard or whatever. Now, at first glance, this makes perfect sense and is quite reasonable. If I have to put in a lot of effort to watch TV, I will probably do it less often. However, if we think about it, maybe we are not so sure anymore. I can imagine different scenarios of how this could fail. For example, I might end up saying, oh well, I had to do all this work, I had to get the TV from the other room, put the batteries back in and whatnot. Now I won't just watch one episode of my series, I will watch 3 or 4 to make up for the effort. Or I might end up saying, oh, this movie is rather boring, but if I stop watching now, I will have to put the TV away again and all that trouble. I think I will watch it to the end so I can put it off for a while. So there are possibilities of how this strategy could actually fail or have an adverse effect. And I can't really tell if it would work or not because we don't have any study or anything like that would clarify. So overall, how does Atomic Habits compare to The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg? In The Power of Habit, we had a detailed description of how habit works, of the research that had gone into that. So we get lots of background information, lots of knowledge about habits. In Atomic Habits, we get lots of specific strategies, actionable steps, advice for how we can change our daily habits, advice for things we can do in our personal lives. So overall, if you are interested in the topic of habits and you want to read both of those books, my recommendation is to start with The Power of Habit, because this will provide lots of background knowledge and will make reading Atomic Habits more interesting. If you want to read one of those books, I would recommend to choose The Power of Habit if you want background knowledge, background information, if you want to learn how habits work. And I would recommend Atomic Habits if you want actionable steps and if you want specific advice for your daily life. This specific edition I have here is perfectly fine. I think the paper quality is actually a bit better than usual. The cover has a soft touch surface, which I find a bit strange. I don't like it that much, but I guess it's supposed to be high quality as well. So this edition is perfectly fine. Speaking of things that accumulate over time, here on the channel we try to accumulate likes and subscriptions, so if you enjoyed the video it would be great if you could help with that. We will see each other again in the next video. For today I take my leave. Have a nice day. See you next time.